Good morning. My name's Kate Barnard, and I'm a first-year MBA at MIT Sloan. I'm also the student lead for the Stadium of the Future panel. We have some really fantastic panelists here today that I'm very honored to introduce. We have Chris Granger, who's the president of the Sacramento Basketball Holding. We have Tony Khan, who's the senior vice president of football analytics at the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have John Knight, who's a senior principal at Populous. Priya Narasimhan, who's the CEO of Yinscam. And moderating the panel today, we have Shira Springer, who's a reporter at the Boston Globe. The panel today is going to run for 45 minutes, and then we'll leave 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So during the panel, if you have any questions or you'd like to vote on the questions that have been asked, you can use the Pigeonhole app. There's a Q&A function, and you can find the panel tab, and you can just ask questions there or vote for questions. And we're really excited about the panel, so enjoy. And now I'll turn it over to Shira, who will kick things off. Thanks.
Thanks. And thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks to all of the panelists. I'm going to dive right in with this panel on the future of the stadium. And one of the things that caught my eye recently was some comments by Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban. And he talked about what he wanted the game experience in arena to be like for the Mavericks. And he said that he wanted it to be very participatory, very social, very inclusive, and that he wanted it to feel like a great wedding. The kind of wedding that it really doesn't matter, sort of, you hope the couple stays together at the end, but really you're there for the party. And he said, we're not in the business, sports business doesn't sell the game. They sell unique emotional experiences, and they don't sell basketball. They sell, again, fun and unique experiences. So I'm curious, when you think about your Stadium of the Future, and the Kings are in the process of building a stadium in downtown Sacramento, Chris, do you agree, disagree with that philosophy? Do you want a great wedding? Is the game important? Is it not about selling basketball? Where do you stand on that?
Sure. So largely I agree. I mean, it should be, the sporting experience generally should be participatory and communal and inclusive and emotional. And I think you can achieve that through the physical design of your stadium or arena. And then I think you can use technology to enhance that. So from a design standpoint, we're doing things like a very big 10,000 seat lower bowl to bring as many people as possible close to the action, a very steep lower bowl to make sure that the sound stays as close to the court as possible to enable a home court advantage for us. From a technology standpoint, we are working with former Disney Imagineers to create a video board that will give a similar viewing experience if you are center court, front row, or last row in the corner. And again, just technology throughout. How can we use technology to make the stadium check into you and make it adapt to you when you walk into it, so your in-arena experience is different than your in-arena experience? So I think all of those physical and technological components matter in creating a communal experience, and those are the things we're doing in Sacramento.
And Tony, I'd throw the same question to you with the enhancements to the stadium that the Jaguars have. Where do you fall on the wedding spectrum?
I think that the most important part of a wedding would be the exchange of the I-dos, and that's the game itself. So if the game's not going well, if the wedding doesn't go off without a hitch, if the spouses to be get into a fight at the altar and the whole thing falls apart, then nobody's happy, right? So I think the game itself is what's the most important. The scoreboard is the most important, not the actual size of the scoreboards, but the score that's being displayed on it. But that being said, I think that the stadium experience is a huge part of bringing fans into your games. I just think that at the end of the day, people would rather see a winner than enjoy the in-game experience, although you want people to be able to do both.
I'm going to come back to you on that because you have a lot of interesting bells and whistles at this new Jaguars stadium that sort of, let's say, complement perhaps the game experience.
Yeah.
Now, Priya, one of the things that Mark Cuban also said in making these comments about the wedding is that, he doesn't want there to be look down moments. He wants everybody engaged, talking, communicating with each other and having, again, that collective experience. I think he said that, again, very participatory. Now, you've developed an app that, with the mission statement that says you want to bring fans closer to the game through the use of technology. You're obviously looking down to use this app. Can they coexist? Can you be at a great wedding and be looking down at your app?
Sure. I think in this day and this age, anyone at a wedding is probably tweeting. It's, the camera in the middle of the wedding table. People are doing that. People are capturing memories through their devices. And this is the device that every one of us carries around with us. So a couple of touch points here, right? So we did the Super Bowl Stadium app, just 3 weekends ago. And one of the things that was unique about the Super Bowl Stadium app this year was the fact that fans inside the stadium got to see commercials as fans outside saw it. Sounds like a really, really simple idea, but it was such a clever little thing because we saw usage go up. Because that's the communal moment that's happening outside that nobody wants to miss out on. Inside, and yes, there's a game, it's the biggest stage, but that moment in time mattered. And everybody was engaged even with a live act in front of them, right? And so that shows that if you throw the right kind of content, people will come. The other touch point here is as well, we started the company based on the fact that, I was a fan, not a sports fan to begin with, went to my first Penguins game, completely fell in love with hockey. And I never looked back. And for me, what I missed was the control I had on my couch at home, but I love the insanity of the stadium, right? And I wanted both. So I like control of the game because I'm a diehard fan. I want to see something from every which way. I want to replay it. If there's a killer dunk, I want to see it again. That's the way I consume content. And so I want to be able to control it. I want, as Chris had said earlier in a conversation we had, I want the opportunity to know that I have access to it. Whether or not I engage is different. I want the opportunity.
Have you found that, I'm sure you've studied how fans engage with your app and engage with the in-stadium experience. Is it 50-50? Or, how much are they looking down and how much are they looking up?
Right. So it depends on the content. Mm-hmm. If you give them a great camera angle and, in an NFL stadium, the sky cam, people absolutely want to see that sky cam dropping down behind the huddle and you see a play develop. Similarly, in basketball, you have a basket cam out there. People love the visceral feeling of the player coming at the basket and dunking it. So it really depends on the content. If you have the right angle, the right content that you can't get anywhere else, people will use it.
Mm-hmm. Now, John, you're in the business of designing stadiums. How, in your design plans, do you account for fans who want to be engaged with an app and be looking down, and fans who want to be looking up and engaged with the whole social atmosphere?
So Tony said the scoreboard's really critical, and I think the scoreboard is, and I think there's an interface between sort of the live experience of being there and all the moments that we create, because that's really what it is. It's 1,000 little moments of memory that really create the full experience. At the end of the day, it's best when your team wins.
Yeah.
But I think that the accessibility of the app is what really, and that's Chris and Priya and I were talking about that before the panel. I think that's what's really, the calculus, that's the important part, is making it accessible, because not everybody wants to have that accessibility. Mm-hmm. Some people want to go to the infinity pool at the new Jags deck and
hang out in the cabana
and hang out in the cabana and have the wedding party right then and there. So I think for us it's really about creating all those touch points, the social interaction spaces, because I think that we're seeing more and more need. There's the customers are asking for more and more spaces like that on top of the apps that connect us to whatever the sport is.
John, you talk about what customers are asking for. I'm assuming you mean your clients who are calling upon you to design.
Well, our clients like Tony, but then Tony's customers.
And that's what I want to get to.
There's no distinction between them, I don't think.
And maybe I'll go back to Chris and Tony first. How do you know what your customers, your fans, want for that in-stadium experience, that in-arena experience? What kind of polling or analytics are you looking at to determine that?
We did a ton, and we continue to do so. So we've surveyed 20,000 people. We've done countless focus groups and open houses and even some crowdsourcing. Would you like to see this bar, this club serve or have this sort of theme or that sort of theme. What would be most important to you? But it's been a whole range in our case of public outreach, because you can't make a mistake. You have to be perfect from day one when you open this. And quite honestly, you have to be perfect beforehand, because the sales process leads into the arena. So we want to be able to lead into it and sell something that we know people are going to be fired up about. So the outreach we have to our fans and non-fans, because it's not just about the Kings, it's about the 150 other events that are going to take place in the arena. We've been aggressive in our outreach and making sure that we understand what will resonate with our fans or our citizens of Sacramento.
So Tony, how do you get to Cabanas from there?
Well,
And for those of you who don't know, the enhanced stadium that the Jaguars have has pools and then poolside cabanas.
Well, I'll start with, to go back to when you asked about how we stay in touch with the fans and what they want. Very similar, you look at social media, look at Facebook, look at Twitter, look at what people are saying on Instagram. If at the game, if people are having problems, you want to know about it. And also the NFL has a survey themselves that they conduct regarding every team. And we finished in 8 categories, first place out of all the teams in the league in 4 out of 8, including in-game technology and the general in-game experience. And then of the remaining 4, we were second in 3 out of 8. And the only category I think we were not in the top 2 was we were 4th in merchandise, and that was some felt the merchandise in the stadium was too expensive. I think we invested a lot of money to see what people felt about the in-game experience could be improved. Our senior vice president of the fan experience and the stadium itself is Hussein Naki, who did an amazing job, along with our president, Mark Lamping, and my father, Shad Khan, of taking what was already a really great stadium and enhancing it. And do you want me to explain more how we got to Cabanas from there?
I'm curious how you got to Cabanas. Please, I'm interested. Some stadiums do have pools now, and yours is one of them.
Well, there are a couple issues. One major issue is that you're trying to compete with the watching at home experience. What's better than watching the NFL at home? Let me tell you something. I watched the NFL in person 16 out of every 17 Sundays. Okay, 15 out of every 17. A Thursday night football plus a bye week. So the Sunday following our Thursday night football game and the bye week Sunday, I get to be like everyone else, and I get to watch Red Zone on my couch. And it's the best. It's the greatest thing. And people are like, I can't believe that somebody who's an NFL owner misses sitting on their couch and watching Red Zone, like Joe Sixpack. And I'm like, it's the best thing in the world. I wouldn't trade what I get to do on a Sunday for anything, but I get what people are saying, that the NFL's created such a great in-home experience, it's hard to compete with. So that's how we got to the scoreboard. And built, with Daktronics and partnered to build the largest scoreboards in the world, plural, bigger than a football field on each side of the stadium. You can see them from an airplane. You can see them from the other side of town. It's great. But then to your point with the Cabanas, we needed to raise our average ticket price. And we couldn't raise the price of every seat. That wouldn't be fair to the fans, and people wouldn't have been happy with that. So how are you going to get more revenue out of the stadium? Well, and then we had this problem with people, ragging on the Jags because we had a stadium that we had excess capacity, and we had put tarps over some of the seats that weren't being utilized to generate some revenue out of those seats. So rather than do that, we ended up taking seats out and removed 7,100 seats. So now there are no more tarps, and you don't hear that anymore. And that's, if somebody says, oh, the Jags and tarps, that's pretty ignorant. And the investments we've made in the stadium have really reduced the talk of, us packing up and leaving town now that you got the nicest scoreboards in the world and these beautiful pools and all the great things we've done to that facility. Now people, all of a sudden don't think you're gonna leave town. And those cabanas have been great for increased revenue. We've been charging $12,500 for the poolside cabanas. There are 4 of them, 50 seats. It's inclusive food and drink, and we sold out every one of them for every game. There are additional cabanas besides those, sold all those out. And people really seem to enjoy the experience over there. So, for us, like I said, it was two separate issues, trying to get more revenue out of the stadium with the pools and the cabanas, and then with the stuff we did with the scoreboards, trying to compete with the great experience the NFL has created, watching NFL football from the comfort of your living room.
And now, John, I was going to say,
well, I think one of the things we saw when we started working with these guys on that pool deck is that we sort of, in the NFL especially, there's sort of traditionalists, sort of the baby boomers, and then there's the experientialists. And it's the millennials that want to participate in a way that's more than just sitting in their seat. They want to be in the cabana, they want to be with their friends, they want to tweet about it, they want to get on Facebook, and they want to say, look at where I am, this is where I am at the game. And so it's a completely, and we've got to think about the traditionalists, because in many ways the traditionalists really still fund the stadium, right? But it's the experientialists, it's the younger people that we want to pull into the experience of going to the NFL games or NHL, whatever, and continue to participate in being a fan.
Right.
And I think that doing things like that really help create that atmosphere.
now, do you do a lot of polling, surveying of fans directly, or do you take, this is John, do you take
We always
from,
work with the teams, yeah. We don't do it as much individually.
And I'm just curious, Chris, you mentioned the 20,000 people you reached out to. What rose to the top of the list? What were the top 3 things that people in Sacramento wanted in their stadium of the future?
For us to start, we weren't asking about specific elements. We were asking to begin with more about the values. What values do you want to see reflected in the stadium? Because we've always said we want this to be a building that is uniquely Sacramento. We don't want this, as much as we love Barclays Center, we don't want this to be Barclays Center 2.0 or Staples Center 2.0. We want this to be a building of and for Sacramento. So when we did the host of surveys and focus groups, you heard things like a commitment to sustainability, a commitment to technology, a commitment to our local agricultural roots. Sacramento is just an amazing place, and that every crop in the world is grown within 100 miles of Sacramento, with the exception of subtropical fruits. So therefore, we're going to be sourcing 90% of our food and beverage from within 100 miles of the arena itself, from a network of 750 farms and craft breweries and local wineries. So it's really going to be a hyper-local experience. So all of those things mattered, as well as just the way we live in Sacramento has a lot to do with the outdoors. So one of the big architectural moves of the arena is to make it what we're calling the world's first indoor-outdoor arena. So if you've seen renderings of the building, we have 150-foot long, 50-foot tall glass doors that will open up. They're airplane hangar doors. So literally, we're going to try to blur the lines between, are you sitting inside watching the game or sitting outside watching the game, because the climate at nighttime is so wonderful there. So all of those things came to the forefront through countless focus groups and surveys. And then once you know the themes, then you can start to design the individual elements behind it.
Now, Priya, when it comes to an app, I mean, obviously the Super Bowl commercial edition is quite clever. How do you come up with editions like that or apps like that? Where do you do your polling, your analytics? Who do you talk to?
Sure. So typically on our roadmap, we have 3 sets of inputs, right? One is directly from our clients, right? The teams we work with, because they're hearing, as we've heard here, they're hearing directly from the fan base about the things they want. So, if Chris or Tony hear of a feature that they want inside their stadium, chances are there's a mobile element of it that could make its way into the app. So I think that's a fundamental source. So our clients do drive our roadmap. The second is we get a ton of support email, right? And from across different leagues. And I think that's very informative, because chances are whatever an NBA fan is asking us, if we think of that and we build it, one of our NFL fans will also use it, because the features are largely there. So our fan input drives our roadmap significantly. So we look at that, we rank the top few features we hear from fans, we look at what it would take to develop that, and we go back to our clients and actually say, here's what fans are saying across all of the leagues we support. We want to go ahead and build this for you. You're going to have this next season. So I think that's a second source of input. The third is looking at how fans use our apps. So analytics, I mean, we've heard that word several times on this panel now. Looking at the patterns of consumption. So the home screen of our apps is largely driven by the principle that we don't want fans to hunt and peck their way through the app, right? So if it's pre-game, all the things you care about pre-game should be in your face. In-game should be in-game stuff. Post-game stuff. So the app should evolve to meet that particular context and time of day, or time of game, time of season, rather than you having to go find it. So how do you use the analytics from fans' usage of all of our products across multiple leagues and then say, this is what a fan expects to see, and this is how we should change it?
We've touched on sort of design trends, but I want to delve a little bit deeper into that. And I think one of the things that caught my eye about the new Sacramento Kings arena is that it's going to only have, and I say only, 17,500 seats, which is small for NBA arenas. That being said, about 3 years ago, the Barclays Center was built with 17,700, I think, and 72 seats. Talk about the decision. You've already talked about the lower bowl and being able to increase the capacity there, but the idea behind having a smaller venue and the in-arena experience that creates, and is that something we'll see smaller venues in the future?
You know, it's interesting, when we were going through the process of design, a lot of the chatter we heard in Sacramento is you need a bigger building, right? You have to have a bigger building to make more money. But the truth is, when you do a real analysis of especially concerts across the country, or even Kings games or NBA games, it's something like 0.3% of all concerts across the country sell more than 18,000 tickets a game. And 0.09% sell more than 19,000 tickets a game for in-arena shows. So there's really you're talking just on the margins about what shows or acts or lost ticket sales would be impacted by going from 17 to 18,000. So that's part one. Like, I don't think the demand really exists at the high end. And then two, and it's something that you and I have discussed over the years, there's great value in intimacy. There's great value in being close to the action. There's great value in not feeling like you are not in the empty bar. So we think our size is perfect for Sacramento, and in fact, I think you're gonna, as you are pointing out, I think you're gonna start to see, at least on the arena side, venues continue to get smaller and smaller. I think the days of the 23,000 seat Palace or United Center are behind us.
John, I see you nodding enthusiastically.
No, I think that's right. I think the size is really critical to experience. You know, I think the more intimate you can make an arena, the more powerful the experience is. And I think you're right. I mean,
you heard it here too.
You're just on the margins, and so reduction. I mean, the same thing happened in Jacksonville.
Taking those 7,100.
We got 7,100. We took out 7,100 seats, but what we put back was something that was way more valuable experientially than a tarp on seats.
And what's crazy is, like, when we talk about putting those cabanas in, trying to generate more revenue in the stadium, when we put the cabanas in, 94% of the business we added was new business.
Right.
Like, it's not like people were, getting rid of their old tickets and picking up a cabana. Those are people that weren't coming to the games. And so that's just been an incredible home run that Hussein and Mark and Dad hit with that.
I think, if you look at the new MLS stadiums that are being built in the last few years around the country, they're all, 19,000, 22.5. They're very intimate. And when you talk to people about going to an MLS game, their response is, God, it was so great. I felt like I was on the field. And which is different than an NFL game where you're just further away. There's an intimacy about it. So I think smaller is probably a trend that we're going to see.
I'm curious, what's the dynamic between you and the Jaguars when you're talking about taking away those 7,100 seats? And I know Chris was saying, the fans sort of were clamoring for bigger, bigger, bigger. Who convinces whom? Is it a discussion? John, do you find yourself pushing clients into the future, or do you find clients pushing you into the future?
I think it's both. I think this was a case where they wanted to get rid of the seats, and we conceptualized a lot of ideas about what could go in place of them. And I think for me, when you talk about taking things out, you've always got to put something back that's special and better than what you've taken out.
And when we talk about, creating the wedding, at the end of the day, I think like I said at the beginning of this, the on-field product is the most important thing. and you want to keep your players happy. So before we made the changes to the seating, the first thing we did with Populous before this was we created the best locker room experience in the NFL. And so it's a little bit different, but that is part of the stadium, right? So if you're gonna create the best in-game experience for the fans, you want to create the best in-game experience, pre-game, halftime, post-game for your players. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
That was pretty cool.
I just think there's a real economic analysis that you can do and that we did around literally building those last 2 rows of seats, and what the cost is of building those last 2 rows is greater than the marginal benefit you're going to get from selling tickets for what's less than 100% of the time. So there's a real science behind it as well. It's not just feel.
Right.
Is there anything that was on your wish list that you didn't get to with either Sacramento or in the enhanced Jaguar Stadium? And John, also, are there things that you wish you could do that clients are like, no way?
I don't think so. And again, we're relatively early in the process. We opened in October of 2016. We're very lucky in Sacramento. We have an ownership group led by Vivek Ranadive, who really doesn't say no. So we've really been able to do some interesting things. And I think where the 2 buckets where we're going to do the most interesting things, aside from the food and beverage, which I talked about, are in the areas of sustainability. We're going to be the first arena that will be 100% solar powered. We're doing some interesting things with positioning architecturally the building on the plaza itself, so it's cooled by the wind every night. So we have this great cooling displacement technology that will use the wind to cool the building at night, which will be neat. And then again, from a technology standpoint, given Vivek, given Paul Jacobs from Qualcomm, we're doing some interesting things from a connectivity standpoint that are going to put our building in a different level when it comes to connectivity than anything else anyone has seen anywhere in the world. So it's been fun. It's been a fun process. And again, we're lucky to have such committed owners.
Anything on your wish list, Tony, that you didn't get to?
It's a process. My father always talks about continuous improvement. And Gus Bradley, our coach, always talks about getting better every day. And it's a process. I think we did everything we wanted to do for this past season. And there are a lot of things we're talking about adding to the stadium in the future, talking about adding a state-of-the-art practice facility adjacent to the stadium. And so not retroactively a wish list, but going forward, yeah, there are things we want to add.
And John, anything you'd love clients to say yes to?
Yeah, of course. Let's just build a new one, But I think that it's always a process. And what Chris is talking about is we're not doing the project with the Sacramento, but when you start out on a process, there's always sort of blue sky thinking, and it's what can we do, what's possible, what are the potentials, and you start there and you work down to the point that you've got the threshold, and you do 1,000 analytics about if we added 1 row, how much capital is that going to cost to do 1 row? You're going to increase the height of the building. You've got that much more steel, and you go through all those analytics to finally get to the point where you say it's not worth it. We're going to keep it like this.
Now, Chris, you've mentioned technology, connectivity. One of the trends certainly seems to have this lightning fast Wi-Fi put into arenas. Is that something, I guess, it seems like it's certainly going to be the next big design or technology trend in new stadiums. What does that mean for you and what you do with apps and sort of in-stadium on-screen technology?
Sure. So we had an interesting discussion ahead of the panel. So it was great that this leads right into it. So everyone expects to be connected wherever they are today. You go to your coffee shop, and sometimes you pick the coffee shop based on the one that has Wi-Fi. Right? It's not always the decision of which one has the best coffee. Coffee being equal, you pick the one that has Wi-Fi in it, right? So I think connectivity is an expectation, and better connectivity, 100% connectivity will become the norm. And so stadiums pushing for that means we can put more and more content into fans' hands when they want it and perhaps when they least expect it. A second discussion that we were just having in advance of the panel is, okay, so you roll these wireless networks out, how do you know they work? And there's, right now there's a lot of art to it, and how do you put more science into collecting the analytics to make sure that if a venue invests millions of dollars in a wireless network, they actually know they have the ROI back from it.
Chris, one of the things you've mentioned to me is immersive virtual reality plans. It sounds very sci-fi and very futuristic. Explain what you have in mind for Sacramento fans.
So we've been playing with virtual reality for about a year at this point. So we have a nice partnership with Oculus. And it's been neat because what we're trying to do is bring the arena experience to as many people as possible. So as great as Sunday Ticket is, or as great as NBA League Pass is, it's very sort of two-dimensional. So how can you enhance that experience? So we're hopeful that through this incredible virtual reality platform, you can have the experience of Vivek or one of our owners sitting courtside at a game. So imagine you are sitting in a theater right next to the arena, or you're sitting in a different room of the arena, and you have these goggles on, and you can feel and hear what it's like to sit courtside in real time as it's happening. So we're playing with that right now. There are just enormous applications for this from a sales standpoint, from a consumer standpoint. But again, what we're trying to do is bring the in-arena experience and that communal experience that we started with to everybody. And we think you can do that through virtual reality.
We've done a lot of work with Oculus, and
It's phenomenal.
And in terms of sales, we've thought about using it for clients to be able to say, put those on and walk through your suite, walk down to courtside. And
That's right.
it's
So we have it
pretty-
now in
it's
our
pretty powerful
experience center, but literally you can get the feeling of what it's like to look on the plaza at our grand entrance. You can stand on the court and shake DeMarcus Cousins' hand. You can stand in your suite. You can walk the concourse. And it's great from a sales standpoint. It's also great from a sponsor standpoint because we can illustrate, here's what your signage will look like. Here's what your concessions will look like. But it's a wonderful storytelling tool that I think ultimately all of us will be tapping into.
Tony, are all of us going to be tapping into it? Do you see immersive virtual reality in the Jaguars' future?
It's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, but now I'm
you
sure
will.
I'll hear from Populous. I'm sure we'll hear from Populous with a plan to implement that very soon.
Now, John, when teams want all these technological bells and whistles and the lightning fast Wi-Fi, and perhaps another part of the stadium where you can have immersive virtual reality, what impact does that have on you as an architect, thinking about how you're going to design the stadium to incorporate all of that?
The impact is really, it's a cost impact more than anything else. It's not a spatial impact. We've got to plan very carefully all the access points for Wi-Fi, and that's what Priya was talking about, making sure the system works. But architecturally, I think it's a very limited impact. And for me, as a designer, I like the technology to be absolutely transparent. I don't like the technology is up front. The technology is in your hand, and that's all you need to know. And when you pull the app up, it works. That's really it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of infrastructure, all the wiring, the DAS, but I think it's transparent for me.
But it matters, right? I mean, going back to the connectivity point, it's not just about delivering great video content, which clearly we all want to have, and we all want to have replays immediately. But ultimately, we all do things like you're ordering food from your app, or you're
Right.
seat upgrading from your app. But imagine gambling from your app. 75% of all NBA betting in the UK happens after the game has started. So there's a real demand for sitting at your seat and saying, how many points are we going to score this quarter? Is he going to make this free throw? Is she going to, score 28 points tonight? So there's the connectivity, the platform of connectivity is so important for things that we're not even doing yet,
Right.
but you have to start laying the groundwork for that now.
I was going to say gambling is very interesting because it's a hot topic now in the sports world. And I wonder, Priya, with your apps, is that something you're looking at, something you're considering? How can we incorporate gambling into the in-arena experience?
Sure. And we work with several international properties as well. And there it's much more accepted as a part of our apps. So we already have some of those capabilities built into some of our overseas products. We've started with things like, how do you predict the next play? How do you decide, who's going to make 30 points tonight? Who's going to have a slam dunk tonight? All those other kinds of things. We already see that if we add those features, and even without the monetary or financial incentive component, fans love the bragging rights of being on top of that trivia ladder. And so we see the engagement. Now looking the next step with all the gambling initiatives is, how do you monetize that engagement? How do you reward that engagement? And there are other forms of it. It doesn't necessarily take the form of gambling, but rewarding it could also happen through things like a loyalty program, right? So as you engage more, you answer 10 questions a game, well, here you go, there's a free hot dog for you, right? You can do other incentives apart from just what we've thought of.
And now, Tony and Chris, is this something, type of quote-unquote gambling, gaming that you see coming to your arenas in the future, and how do you plan to integrate it into the overall game experience?
I can't even say the G word. The NFL doesn't like the G word. What would it be? I think what we've brought into the in-game experience is an upgraded fantasy football experience, which is what I think a lot of our fans are looking for. And one thing we've done that was kind of considered to be a radical change, and a lot of people at first ragged on us for, was we've shown red zone in the stadium. With having more scoreboard space, having the bigger scoreboards than anybody else, we can do different things, with social media, things like that, but it also allows us to do something experimental like show red zone so people can keep track of how their fantasy players are. Something we have to be really mindful of in Jacksonville. We are the second most transient market in the NFL. Only Washington, D.C., for obvious reasons, more transient than Jacksonville, and the reason Jacksonville has a lot of turnover, in addition to other things, would be the very large military population in Jacksonville. And so we have to be mindful that in Jacksonville, a lot of people's favorite local team might be their own fantasy team. We built the league's first fantasy lounge. And so, allowing people to keep an eye on their team. Ashley Furniture partnered with us and put 34 leather luxury recliners in. Microsoft partnered with us. We put Xboxes in there. We have big screen TVs with every game in the league being played at that time showing. So on Sunday, people can keep an eye on their fantasy team. I know it's not exactly the gambling stuff you'd asked about, but
It's close. It's related.
yeah.
And Chris, what Priya was talking about, do you see that in a scoreboard, like fans, like when you're on an airplane, you play the trivia game and you get, seat A, B, C is ahead, and doing that with seats in the arena?
No question. It's 100% going to happen, and not just in a gaming points loyalty program sort of, which we're doing now. At least in Sacramento, we're starting to do that right now. So I love it. Our fans are completely engaged with it. It makes it more fun for them, just as fantasy does. It's just an extension of that. But it's 100% going to happen where it's not just playing with points and you're playing with dollars.
Your guys' just to really relate it while we're up here, for the NBA, I think the NBA needs to change the way they look at fantasy. Fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball, when I talk to people about playing them, they say it's too much work. It's too much work. I have to change a roster every day. And fantasy football, I think one thing people love about it is you really only need to adjust the rosters once a week, but the default setting for a fantasy basketball league is daily updates.
Well, I think that's why you see such an explosion right now in one-day fantasy.
Right.
So whether it's the league's partnership with FanDuel or our partnership with DraftKings, you clearly see it starting to happen right now because it's hard. You don't want to change your team every single day. So the NFL has an inherent advantage from that standpoint, but one-day fantasy, I think, is a great equalizer for us, and we've seen an explosion in it just in the last few months.
My friends and I have like a NBA fantasy league, but we update, it's like fantasy football. We update it once a week, and it's the number of games captured in that week. And, counting stats add up, and it's like similar to a fantasy football concept.
So we've morphed into the fantasy sports panel.
That was my last panel at Sloan.
But getting back to the stadium experience, what other ways do all of you see technology adding value to the in-game experience? And one of the things that I've heard about is seat upgrades. While the game is going on, and let's say there's an empty couple of seats in a better position, real-time seat upgrades during games. What other opportunities, maybe we'll start with Priya, with your technology background, do you see technology enhancing that in-game experience and getting people off the couch?
Sure. So I think seat upgrades, I'd say, in a large number of our apps, our team apps, it's already a standard feature at this point in time. The other thing that we also had a discussion about was the discoverability of the venue, right? So I take my 8-year-old to quite a few games, and I know for sure that we've only seen 20% of the venue, Because you're on autopilot when you go to a venue, you have your ticket, you get to a place, but there's so much stuff there that you wish you could see. There's an autographed jersey from a guy's rookie year that you wish you had seen. You go back home and you tell somebody you went to the venue and they asked you if you saw it. Right? So improving the discoverability of the venue and making sure that when someone goes there, they see and they can experience and they know about everything they could see. And I don't mean just let's show them a map of everything. I mean, as you're going through the venue is able to communicate all the stuff that it has to you. And that's architectural, it's experience, it's connectivity, it's mobile, it's everything. How does the venue talk to you so you have a personalized experience as a fan?
Chris, any other value-added technology?
I would just say that we think about technology in 4 ways, and Ryan Montoya, our Chief Technology Officer, is here. One, from our building standpoint, we want it to be adaptive. We say the building will check into you. So my experience in the building, when I arrive to the building, it's going to say my reservation is here, happy birthday, get your 50% off here, but immediately the building should recognize me and give me a different experience than anybody else. 2, we want it to be event enhancing, so things like ordering from your seat or upgrading my seat or gambling from my seat, but or high density video from my seat and replays, but event enhancing. 3 is we want it to be frictionless or remove friction from the fan experience. So my phone should be my ticket, it should be my payment mechanism. I should be able to wirelessly charge my phone at the end of the day so I don't have to worry about carrying around a charger with me all the time. And then 4, we want to use data in a fast manner. So we want to be able to collect data in real time to know that Tony has gone here, and typically he goes to games and buys 4 beers, but today he bought 10, so something special must be happening. So how can we reach out to him right now and wish him happy birthday or something else? But the fast data component of it is important to us too. So those are the elements of the infrastructure we're trying to put in place.
How about for the Jaguars? How do they view technology and in-game experience and what they're looking at in the future to add value?
Absolutely. We're constantly, like I said, trying to improve. As far as technology, it's really funny you ask. I had a really interesting meeting this week with some guys from out in LA who came to Jacksonville, and they're developing technology. It's a new point of sale concept that we think could be interesting. We're constantly evaluating things like that. And again, this really isn't my primary area of expertise. I'm a football analytics person, so normally I'd be one of the guys talking about whether to go for it on 4th down. Yes. Yeah, it's something that, again, that we're constantly evaluating. And I think you have to also be mindful, Jacksonville is an older market. As Hussein and Kelly and I were just talking about in Jacksonville before I came here, that not all of our fans are utilizing mobile apps and things of that nature, and you have to be mindful of them too.
Right.
So it's a balance. It's a balance. You want to constantly be on the cutting edge while being mindful of those who aren't.
And I think what Chris said, the word he used was perfect, frictionless, and I think that's how I see the application of technology. If it's frictionless, then if you're not a user, it doesn't interfere with your experience of the game. But if you are a user, then it's at your fingertips, and you can deploy all of its wonder, right? And I think that's what I was talking about earlier, the sort of the traditionalists that aren't tech savvy, that don't want to be tech savvy, that don't care about it. They just want to go do the same thing every time.
And I'd be remiss, John, if I didn't ask you, this is probably more of a personal question, but your firm has been heavily involved with Olympic stadium development. Boston 2024, the potential for the Olympics to come here. What do you see as the future potential for Olympic stadiums, whether it's from a technological aspect, whether it's from a physical aspect? We're talking now 9 years down the road. I assume what most of us have been talking about on this panel is 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, if not earlier, sooner.
Well, I think the stadium that we developed for the London Games was really a response to the Beijing Games. And I think that in London, we approached the main stadium as a more sustainable prototype that could be redeployed as a smaller venue. And I think that as we move into the future, I think that Olympic Games will become more technologically savvy, And like Chris's new arena, they're going to be a much more sustainably approachable. We are actually working right now on developing basically a lead checklist for temporary overlay. So I think that all of those things are going to happen. I think that just the cost of a new Olympic stadium is such a burden for so many places that finding a way to reduce the cost and reuse the material will be really critical.
Now I'm going to turn to audience questions. Let's see, to what extent will the Stadium of the Future provide teams with data on the fans that choose to attend a game? Example, who attends, what they're buying, what experiences are they having? I think we've talked a little bit about this, but if a couple of you want to elaborate to the depth of data you might be able to mine from fans.
So I think a lot of that is already happening today. So I would say across the board, several of our teams collect ticketing data, content analytics, so you can see what kind of content fans are consuming. With beacons getting deployed, beacon analytics, where people are spending most of their time, which entrances are more congested. We're collecting wireless analytics. You'll see a huge push for that, just so you know what the ROI of a wireless network is. So I'd say, and then loyalty and gaming and all these other things. So there are different buckets of analytics already being collected. I think the next wave of it is stitching those together with a unified breadcrumb. I think that's a struggle across the board because none of these identify the person in the same way.
Right.
And that's a universal challenge, but I think that's really the big thing to solve for.
That's what's scary about Apple Pay, right? To a lot of people in the stadium, I think that you'd like to be able to get as much information as possible, people paying through your app or through an alternative method. Whereas with Apple Pay, you're not getting all the data you'd like to be getting on your consumer.
Chris, did you want to add something, or you?
No, I agree. I mean, we're pulling everything now.
You were
right?
nodding,
Pull
so-
everything from merchandise to food, social, everything, pull it together, and then try to get a 360 view of the fan.
This might be good for you, given how much data you collected on the new new Sacramento Kings arena. Have you reached new audiences by improving in-stadium experience? And if so, who's attending who was not before? I mean, you're probably getting some early indication if you've reached new audiences.
The advantage we have right now in playing in a 30-year-old building is it allows us time to test different things. Mm-hmm. So it's been fun for us to test different ticket packages, different technology outreaches to fans, different ways to use social media to gather people in and around our games. So yes, I would say we have started to get some inklings of what we might do when we move downtown. But right now, we're doing a lot of testing and prototyping right now, as we will for the next coming 18 months or so.
Tony, have you reached new fans?
Yeah, like I said, we had when we upgraded the seating areas with the swimming pools, the cabana area. As I said, 94% of the business we added was new business. So we didn't have to cannibalize our existing fan base to get people in those seats. And not only that, but we were able to generate more revenue out of the area than we possibly could have generated out of that before. So yeah, absolutely. Improving the in-stadium experience has really helped us reach new fans and generate new business.
This is an interesting one. How often do you have to upgrade a stadium to stay current and cutting edge compared to the rest of the league? I mean, I think that's a question for John. Like, you worked with the Jaguars.
Well, I would
do
say that the time frame for upgrades is getting shorter and shorter all the time. But seriously, and I think it's partly because of the customer's expectations of what the experience will be changes constantly, and so you have to change with the customer. And so I think a lot of the upgrades, a lot of the changes are simple. The end zone upgrade at Jaguars was a fairly complex project, but it wasn't that crazy. But I think it's easy to go in and upgrade small pieces of stadiums and arenas to reach to a specific target audience that you've got. But I do think that if you've got a brand new facility and you haven't done anything in 7 to 10 years, you've fallen behind.
Chris, as you look at a 2016 opening date, do you worry that some of the bells and whistles technologically will need to be upgraded in 2018? I mean, and if so or if not, how do you look at upgrading?
Yeah. I don't know that I worry about it. Like, there's value in changing things over time. I mean, it's the Disney World model.
Absolutely.
There's always a new attraction. Something is always different, and that's part of the reason that people keep coming back. That said, we're spending a ton of time right now on the front end with our partners at Qualcomm and others to make sure that we are laying not enough pipeline for 2016, but enough pipeline to manage 2026 as well. So I think we're spending a lot of time on the front end, again, to make sure that we are building a platform now that is at, make up a number, 30% of capacity, so that over time, we're going to be able to layer onto it as well. So we're building with upgrades in mind in the future.
So here's one. What are the most important touch points and data points you are trying to capture in venue, and how do we capture them without intruding on the game experience for the fan? I think, Priya, that may be up your alley.
Sure. So it starts with the ticket. I think every one of us obsesses about, ticketing. It's important for the fan that they're rewarded for showing up at the game, right? So the ticket is not just about the team, the venue collecting the data. It's also about incentivizing the fan to be able to have their ticket on their phone, to be able to do everything related transactionally on their phone. Concessions, right? To be able to pay for things using your phone. I mean, you walk into Starbucks, you can pay for your coffee that way. It should be that seamless for everything else you do transactionally. Content, so being able to get whatever you want, whenever you want, both ways, right? It's not just that you're consuming it, you're also publishing it, right? And how do you get your content and your perspective out to everybody else? It's that part of it. It's collect all of those pieces of data and then collect data about the locations in terms of where people are not just spending their time, but where they're not spending their time. And that promotes discoverability of the venue. So I think it's collecting all of those pieces of data. How does it change the fan experience? It allows you, going back to something Chris said earlier, it allows you to personalize the game experience. I think gone are the days when my phone looks like anyone else's phone. My set of apps looks like anyone else's. I think if you looked at all 4 of our phones, we'll have different collections of apps, devices, customization. We expect that today. And I think the fan will expect that their game experience looks like no others. Mm-hmm. And that's where data will help.
Anybody else want to chime in on that? This also seems to be destined for Priya. Which app brand will be the one users trust? The brand of the venue, the team, or event-specific app? How do people discover this app?
Sure. When we first started, I mean, you're always tempted as a vendor, and this is personal. You're tempted as a vendor to put the apps under your name. The fan has no affinity to me, right? As an individual, it's great for me as a vendor. Don't get me wrong. The fan has zero affinity to me. I'm just a vendor. The thing that I, as a fan myself, have affinity to is my team. It's not even necessarily the league. It's my team. I'm a fan of my team first and foremost. The affinity starts there as a kid, as an adult, as anything. So I think it's the team that you identify with. That's who you call yourself as a fan of. And so I personally believe it's the team app that honestly is where you get the most affinity and the most engagement.
Now I have one here for Tony. Or actually, it's for everyone. Cabanas and apps are great, but do you fear it stops fans from being really loud and affecting the teams and the game's energy?
I don't think that was the case at all. In fact, we won more games at home this year than we did in the previous 2 years combined. So no, I don't think that was the case. It's small sample size, but no, it's. I'm not worried about that. I don't think that's the problem we're experiencing. I think the first thing you worry about is getting fans in the building, and then you worry about getting them engaged. And I think our people have done a great job of doing that, whether it's with the cabanas or with the fantasy lounge. I mean, one of the problems we faced that I didn't get into was in Jacksonville, it's really hot, especially early in the season coming off the summer. It can be hot at the games. And we had air-conditioned space that was unutilized. That's what we turned into the fantasy lounge. And so, basically, I think the more different things you can do, like cabanas, like fantasy lounges, to get people there, once they're there, they're going to be on your side. They can be your version of the 12th man. So no, I don't think that's our concern.
Can I jump in on that?
Yes, please.
So on the app side, and again, I'll go back to a personal example. When I go with my 8-year-old to a game, I think it's great if, when my team wins, I'm screaming as loud as I possibly can until I can't hear when I go back home. But what's priceless to me is, there's that touchdown, and then I'm taking pictures of my kid. And I'm sending them off to people. I'm taking the video of him jumping up and down. I can't do it any other way, because for me, what matters is 10 years from now, I remember what my kid did, and I remember going to the game with him. I mean, that goes back to the wedding question at the beginning. For all of us, as much as we are fans, it's personal about the people we go to the game with. It's the shared experience of being there with them, the bragging rights of it, and remembering something 10 years later and saying, I was there. And I turn to my kid 10 years from now and say, you were there and you don't even remember it, but here's the evidence, right? And that's, I think, where apps and mobile have a role. They don't get in the way of your game. They help you remember the game. They help create stickiness for it years from now, when you think it doesn't matter, but it really does.
Chris, you look like you're... ...
And they help people outside the venue see why they should be in the venue.
I agree, 1,000%.
Here's an interesting one. How does your strategy on improving fan engagement in Arena vary across socioeconomic classes? It's a heavy question.
It's a great question.
I don't think it's anything different than what we've said. I think you try to give people an experience that appeals to them as individuals. And without getting socioeconomic class into it, like my experience might be different than yours, might be different than yours. And the more I know about you as an individual, that's how I'm going to try to craft your experience and try to personalize your experience. So I think about personalization at a hyper level, not just at a class level.
Yeah, and again, when I talk about we're trying to raise the revenue in certain parts of the stadium, it's not like you can hike up the prices everywhere. That wouldn't be fair to all the fans, and maybe there's some fans that can't afford the $12,500 cabanas. Certainly there were a lot that could, because they all sold out immediately for every game. But so you have to be mindful of what different fans are looking to get for their dollar at each and every game.
I would say that in general, the level of quality and amenity on like what we would call a main concourse for a general fan is improved like 300% over the last 10 years. I mean, I think we've all been paying a lot more attention to the quality of the general spectator's experience.
Yeah.
I think even in ours, and you've seen our design, part of, I think, what's going to be neat about ours is if we open those doors, or when we open those doors 50 feet tall and 150 feet long, we also have a massive plaza outside the building as well. So we think people who are standing outside the plaza are going to be able to hear the roar of the crowd. They're literally going to be able to watch the game through the doors onto the big video board. So we think people outside the building are going to be able to experience what's happening inside the building. And then, of course, you layer on concessions and everything else outside as well to monetize it a bit. But I think
but it just creates a broader experience
That's
for
right.
everybody.
That's exactly
I mean,
right.
we're doing similar things at the new Las Vegas Arena. There's actually an elevated platform for a band and a big plaza, so there's going to be a lot more interaction even before you cross the threshold inside the arena.
That's right.
Can I jump in on that too?
Sure.
So when I started this thing as a computer engineering professor. As a faculty member at a university, you can afford a nosebleed seat on a good day. And I would go to very few games because it's an affordability issue, right? The only thing I think that's really important is when you can afford to go, make it spectacular and make it memorable. And that's what I would go for.
We've got about 1 minute left, and an interesting question here. Maybe you can all chime in very quickly on. It says, how important is marketing and PR and communicating how stadiums are changing, what the future of the stadium will be? Do we need to retrain fans on what it means to attend a live sporting event? Because it certainly seems with everything that you're adding, that's an important aspect.
Absolutely. I think we've completely done a 180 in terms of what people think of when they think of attending a Jaguars game and what it's going to be like. And not just with the obvious things like the biggest scoreboards in the world, but the fact that in a year we increased our throughput in our 4 major concession areas by 30%. We also increased our revenue by 30%. But I think it's, just trying to make the game more enjoyable for the fans. So yeah, I think you have to get the word out when you make these changes, absolutely.
I'd answer it a bit differently when I think about marketing and PR. I think what I'd like to see more from a marketing PR standpoint is sports teams using their platform to drive a message. So from a design standpoint, I'd love to see the message of sustainability drive a little bit harder than perhaps we have in the past, whether it's through LEED or solar or air displacement systems. I think the eyes of the world are on sports teams, and to the extent that we can use our celebrity to drive businesses, not just sports venues, in a different direction, that's my objective from a PR standpoint.
Yeah, most people don't know, but before I got into sports, I was in the biodiesel business. We were making hundreds of thousands of gallons of biodiesel from used cooking oil, and it's the greatest process in the world. It's the greatest fuel in the world, and hopefully, I know we're going to contribute to it, and I totally agree with what Chris said.
John, anything about retraining
Yeah,
fans from your
I think it's
perspective?
absolutely what the future is going to be about, is figuring out how to make these big buildings use less energy.
And also just getting the message across to fans that this is the new experience. Priya, thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think in addition to the marketing PR side of it, it's make technology make the venue more discoverable. Help that.
I think that covers it for now. We'll see how things turn out 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Thank you all for attending.